In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. We ask you, our Lord, to be with us and dwell in our hearts and enlighten our minds. Help us to find you in your holy word through the intercessions of Saint Mary and the Holy Family. And hear us as we pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Alrighty, so I'm thinking, we said we'd go for 4 to 6 weeks with Sirach. So this is week 5, and I'm thinking maybe we'll have one more week, and then we'll move on to something else, if that's okay with everybody. So I thought a fitting topic to finish off with next week would be the happy topic of death. So we're going to spend some time seeing what Sirach wants to tell us about death next week. But you'll be pleased to know that we have a genuinely more interesting or more cheerful topic this week. And what we'll be talking about is bits from Sirach about our speech, about talking. And he has quite a lot to say on it. I've probably prepared more passages than we'll have time to read in a bit, in 45 minutes today. But let's see how we go. So what do I mean by speech? Well, you all know that verse from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, "For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." And of course, we have lots of advice, both in the Bible and in the church fathers and other things that we read, about being really careful about your words. We've all heard the famous, Saint Arsenius quote, "Many times I have spoken and regretted, but never have I kept my silence and regretted." And of course, you will all think of times or events or incidents in your own life when words were hurtful, when words were unhelpful, at least, whether it came from you or whether it was others and you were the victim of the bad effects of the words. But of course, nobody is saying that we shouldn't speak at all, because we need speech, we need words. Just imagine life if you couldn't communicate using language. Life would be very, very difficult. And it would also be significantly less interesting. Imagine life without poetry and stories, news. Maybe you think life might be better if you didn't have to watch the news. I don't know. Just how would you get along with the people in your house? How would you let them know what you need or how you feel? How would you communicate your hopes and your dreams? Or tell them things about your past? How would you get to know each other without words? Communication is a really, really important thing. And to be sure, some of that communication, maybe a lot of that communication, happens without words. Things like facial expressions and hand gestures and actions and things like that, by all means. But an awful lot of our communication is by words. And in fact, when God wanted to speak to us, he speaks to us through nature, that's true, but then he spoke to us through the Bible. And guess what the Bible is made up of? It's made up of words. And in fact, when he spoke to us in the clearest way possible by becoming a human being, the apostle called him the Word of God. So clearly, words are very, very important. Words are a sign that we are like God, that we can understand ideas. We're not just animals, that just react to the environment and that's all. We can think about abstract things. And we use language to communicate those abstract ideas, the things that lift us above just the material world and lift us into the realm of the spiritual, the realm of the things that are not material. Words are probably the best way we have of doing that. And therefore Jesus is the word. So clearly what's required then is not that we stop speaking altogether, but that we learn how to speak well, how to do it properly. And that's pretty much what we're going to be asking Sirach to help us with today. So let me see if I can share my screen. I can. Thank you very much, Bill. And hopefully you can now see a passage up there in front of you. So the first passage that I chose, and as I said, I've got 4 of them, but I don't think we'll get through them all today. And that's okay. There's probably lots more we could have as well. Let's just see how we go. So the first one is just thinking about this idea of discernment, this idea of the need to be wise in how we use our words. So let's just read it, and then hopefully we've been doing this for a few weeks now. So I'd love you guys to, please join in. Please don't be shy or bashful. There's no wrong answers. If you haven't joined in before, this is a great chance. Just jump in. Just tell us something you liked or something you understood from what I'm about to read. Okay, here we go. There is a rebuke which is not timely, and there is he who is silent but has discernment. How much better it is to rebuke than to seethe with anger. He who confesses his fault will be kept from loss. Like the desire of a eunuch to violate a maiden, so is the man who executes justice by violence. There is a man who is silent but is found to be wise. There is a man who is hateful because he talks too much. There is a man who is silent because he has no answer. And there is a man who is silent because he knows when to speak. A wise man will keep silent until it is the right time to speak, but an arrogant and undiscerning man will speak out of turn. The man who talks too much will be detested, and the man who stands on his rights will be hated. So there's an awful lot there, and you can see the usual pattern from the wisdom books, right? He's not building an argument or telling a story. What he's doing is, it's just these little pithy sayings, what's the word for proverbs, like a little proverb, right? And the idea is you're meant to read them and just sort of think about them. What is he really talking about here? So would anyone like to jump in and pick one of those little sayings? And it could be something that you think is cool, makes a lot of sense. Could be something you think is very confusing and it doesn't make any sense at all. Who'd like to jump in? Go for it. I'm not counting to 5 this time. I'm just going to wait till someone jumps in.
I'll jump in.
Yes, please, go for it.
The line where it reads, how much better it is, to rebuke than to seethe with anger.
Yes, that's verse 2.
I'm not sure if he is, I don't think it's serious. I don't think he's being serious there, but is it something that we have to think about? Is it better to sit there even though you're angry and bottle something in, or let it out?
So which do you think? You think it's better to let it out or to just bottle it in?
Well, I don't think bottling anything in is wise, but I don't think rebuking is also. So I don't necessarily think that one should rebuke another person. I think you can contemplate and reflect on the situation that happened. And I know that this isn't always going to be something that we do all the time when we do start to get angry. It is very difficult to do. But rebuking is probably the wrong word. Maybe like having a conversation, a gentle conversation about how you feel, but definitely not to rebuke. Because I don't, well, I don't know. Because rebuking is like to criticize, right?
Yeah, like to tell them off,
Yeah.
to tell them they've done something wrong. Yeah.
And it'd be difficult to criticize a person, especially somebody that you love, without hurting their feelings. And I suppose, like, what's your intention behind it all?
Mm.
If your intention is to hurt, then yeah, you will have hurt. But even if your intention is good, it's always the other person that potentially could still get hurt.
So if someone hurts me, are you saying, yeah, so I mean, you don't, you're saying neither of these is really the best option. Is there a third option?
Yeah,
What's that?
I guess so. Like I mentioned, I guess silence is good, but
Okay.
it's silence where is it silent of the mind? Because I don't think I can silence my mind, and I'd have to, like, knowing me, I think about the situation that just occurred, and I'll keep thinking about it and thinking about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, look, you've actually reminded me of some research I read years ago now, but I don't think it would have changed, where they actually kind of looked at how people cope with conflict or, difficulties in relationships and stuff. And they sort of found that there were three broad patterns. One was to bottle it in, right, and just to be like it says there, to seethe with anger, but not to say anything. Two was to let it all out and blow up, and there's this huge drama and so on. Not necessarily huge, but to actually engage in a conflict with the other person. And the third one was to just let it go, right? So not to say anything, but not to keep it inside either, just to kind of give it up, let it go. It's not a big deal. I don't really care. Let's move on, kind of thing. And it was a medical study. So they were looking at what, the health of people who have these three different approaches. They measured things like, blood pressure and diabetes and, strokes and heart attacks and stuff like that. Do you want to guess which one was the least healthy group? Remember, the options are let it go, or hash it out, or just keep it in and seethe. Guess which was the least healthy?
bottling it in.
Bottling in was very clearly the worst thing you can do. Staying angry and keeping it inside. Which was the sort of middle one, the sort of, not the healthiest, but not the worst.
Letting it all out.
Yeah, it was actually letting it out. It was the people who, had a big discussion and argued about it and stuff like that. They still had some bad health effects out of it. And the healthiest ones were the ones who were able to just let it go. It's not a big deal in terms of those measures of, physical health. Now, physical health is not the only thing, obviously, that, we measure our lives with, or that we live our lives according to. But there probably is something to that. And I think there's also, though, something to be said for what he says in verse 1 there. There's a rebuke which is not timely. Sometimes there may be things that it's important to talk it out because you may actually be able to resolve it rather than letting the thing that's bugging you just keep going and going for years and years and years. Right? Communication is really important. It is helpful, but when you speak is also a really important aspect here. Picking the wrong time when the person is not ready to speak, they're too tired, they're under pressure because of something else, whatever it might be. That even if you do that with the best of intentions, you're speaking with the best of intentions and you're going into it calmly and peacefully and humbly, but if it's not the right time, then there's a good chance that that's going to get sabotaged and it won't end well. So there's this question of knowing when is the right time to speak as well. Okay, yeah, no, thanks for that. That's really good. Anyone else want to pick out another verse from there? Or Murray can have another go if you like. There's a slightly odd one there, isn't there? Do you know which one I'm talking about? Slightly R-rated.
Yes, number 4.
Yes. So a eunuch is someone who has had his manhood surgically removed, if I can put it that way. I think, anyone need further clarification? Has been castrated. I believe the young people call it having his junk removed these days. Okay, so, and this was a thing, like in ancient times, they had slaves, right? And sometimes they needed male slaves to protect the harem, the women. And of course, if you're going to put a male slave in with all the women, things are going to happen that you don't want to happen. So what they would do is they would surgically remove anything that might make anything happen. So that's what a eunuch was.
So can I just ask on that point, did they also lose their desire? So they had no desire as well, is that right?
I'm actually not sure of the answer to that, Magdi. Look,
I thought that they didn't have a desire either.
Look, it is quite likely simply because your hormone balance changes completely because the testes are the things that make testosterone, which is generally one of the big drivers of male aggression and desire and so on. So if you remove those, I do think that, like, over the years, I seem to remember that because you've removed the testosterone, but men also have estrogen, like, their bodies produce a lot less than women, but they do have estrogen. So when you remove the source of the testosterone, now the estrogen comes to predominate. And so that has an effect on mood and how they think and feel and act and stuff like that as well. So yeah, and so basically what he's saying is, it's like a eunuch trying to rape a woman. It's like he can't. It's like, that's just stupid. But what's he using that as an example of? The man who executes justice by violence. So if you think that by attacking people, and remember, this is a passage where he's talking about speech. So he's not necessarily talking about punching people, although I'm sure that would be applicable. But he's really talking here about violent speech. If you think you're going to be aggressive and attack people and therefore solve the problem or make the relationship better or whatever it might be, then you're just as silly as the eunuch who thinks that he's going to be able to rape a woman. It's like, no, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to work. So sorry, I just thought that was a very colorful way to say what he wanted to say there. One more. Anyone want to choose one? Okay, what do you think of this one? The man who talks too much will be detested. Is that necessarily the case?
That's why no one was speaking about it. No one wants to be
Ah.
detested.
Ah, now
Yeah,
I
Buna,
get
you can't give us a whole paragraph about not talking and then expect us to talk.
Okay, then what we need then is to look at the things that say you should talk.
Yeah, I think the six, there is a man who is silent, but he has no answer. I think that more accurately reflects the group.
Okay, let's look at that one. Because that's a really interesting one. I underlined it because I thought it was very interesting. There's a man who is silent because he has no answer, and there is a man who is silent because he knows when to speak. Right. So if you look at both of those men, they probably look exactly the same, don't they? They're both just sitting and saying nothing. But the reasons why they're saying nothing are very, very different. But again, there's this idea of, discernment, being wise, knowing when to speak. So I would encourage you that this is one of those times when you should speak. But don't, the talking too much thing. I've often thought, I really get what Ambar Sanyus was saying. I can't remember any time where I thought I didn't talk enough. I should have talked more. It's very unusual to have that experience. But I have had many, many times the experience of, you talk too much. Why did you talk so much? You should have stopped.
Well, Buna, can you go through the last line? And the man who stands on his rights will be hated.
Yeah, so what do you think that means? That also seems to be an odd thing for us to say, particularly these days where, rights are the most important thing, apparently. The man who stands on his rights will be hated. Is that the case? What do you think? Is it wrong to insist on your rights? Gosh, you really are taking this silence thing to heart. Look, notice he doesn't say he's doing something wrong in this verse, is he? He's just simply describing a consequence. If you insist on your rights, be prepared. There are going to be people who hate you. And of course, I think what he's pointing out here is that other people think that, they have rights as well. And sometimes their rights will conflict with your rights. And it's human nature that when you insist on your way, and that costs someone else their way, they're not going to like you. They're not going to think very positively about you. They're going to be quite cranky with you. So I think what he's doing there is he's just sort of, pointing out a consequence, not necessarily saying that you shouldn't pursue your rights, at least in that passage, in that verse, in that line. But I think that's what he's saying. You have any other thoughts, Magdi?
No, I always find this a tough point because there's a verse in the Bible, I can't remember where it was, where it says that you shouldn't defend yourself. It's in one of the epistles. Something along the lines of basically you shouldn't defend yourself. So if someone's done wrong by you, don't take him to court, don't sue them, just let it go almost, I can't remember where it is, but
okay.
But anyway,
yeah, there's a bit where St. Paul says that Christians shouldn't take each other to court. I don't know if that's the one you're thinking about.
Maybe. But yeah, I think that the tough thing is I think in the society that we live in, always like you should stand up for your right, even to the point where if it's around Christmas time and you're looking for a parking spot and you found that spot first and someone comes in later, and if he dares put that blinker on, you're not going to wait. You're going to let them know that you're there first. Do you know what I mean? So I think normally in our society, you're meant to stand up for your right.
Yeah.
But then throughout the Bible, throughout the Bible, there's verses, and even this verse here, where maybe don't always stand up for your right. You know, so just
Yeah.
the balance I find is a bit difficult.
And what about the love of the second mile? You know, and if someone strikes you on one cheek, give to him the other also, and so on. That's
So you're
sorry?
trying to say we should give that parking spot up?
I think we
That's
should.
real Christianity right there, Buna.
I
That
think we
person
should,
that gives up that parking spot, that's
It
love.
is. It is. It's the miracle of Christmas. But I mean, all joking aside, I actually think, yeah, that is actually, you know, look, I think you can only lovingly give up your rights, like willingly and joyfully, if you have a clear conception of the rights first, right? Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So I think we all kind of have to go first through the phase where we do insist on our rights so that we understand what rights mean and the value of them and things like that. And then having done that, then we are in a position to say, you know what, I know what it is that I'm giving up. And I'm actually doing this with my eyes open. And I'm happy to do it. And of course, that's why it's, you know, the second mile is the mile that takes us to God. Because God could very easily insist on his rights with us. I created you. I gave you a beautiful world to live in. I gave you a conscience and a spirit. I gave you other people. And look how you've spoiled it all. I demand my rights. You should be punished for what you've done, or you should, you know, I'm going to take it all back because this is why we can't have nice things in the world, you know, because you guys mess it all up. Sure, God could do that, but what he did instead is come down and become one of us and die on a cross in order to restore the beauty of life to us by doing that. And that's I think, you know, giving up your parking spot at Christmas is partaking in the crucifixion. But you should do it willingly and joyfully, right? If you're doing it grumpily or you're doing it because the other guy was quicker than you, I don't think it counts. All right, let's move on to gossip. So before I start, do you want to give me an idea? Is this a big issue for you guys? If not, I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But if it is, he has some interesting things to say. Anyone just want to tell me, is gossip an issue for you guys? Is it one of the things you find comes up in your confessions? Not that you have to, now that I've said that, no one's going to answer. Okay, thank you. Yeah. All righty. So let's see what he has to say about this. He who trusts quickly is unwise in heart, and he who sins will err against his own soul. He who rejoices in evil shall be condemned, and he who hates talkativeness will sin less. Never repeat a word, and you will lose nothing at all. With friend or enemy, do not report it, and unless it is a sin for you, do not reveal it. For someone heard you and watched you, and in time will hate you. Have you heard a word? Let it die with you. Take courage, it will not burst you, but a fool will suffer birth pangs because of such a word, like a woman in labor with a child, like an arrow stuck in the flesh of a thigh. So is a word inside a fool. Okay. Anybody want to elaborate, talk about anything here? Anything caught your eye?
Should I go again?
Yeah, please.
The part at the end,
Yeah.
I didn't really send goosebumps, but it was like quite eye-opening that a fool is being likened to a woman in labor.
Yeah, what's he saying here?
I don't know. You tell me, Abuna.
Anybody want to hazard a guess? What's he saying here? How is a fool, and the word he's speaking about is like a bit of juicy gossip, right? So the fool hears a bit of juicy gossip and becomes like a woman in labor with a child. What's he saying here?
Is it because he's or she is bringing pain and destruction along with them? I'm not saying that a baby is pain and destruction, but like,
Who is suffering the pain?
I have a feeling, Abuna, that when you're talking gossip, for the most part, it's geared towards negativity. And when you're talking negativity, it generally impacts on your own well-being or
mindset.
yeah, your own mindset. Could it be in that regard?
Yeah, I think we're heading in the right direction here.
I think
So-
And then
I
Yeah,
think
so-
doing
Go on.
I think my understanding of the last few verses is that they should all be taken together. That when you feel like you have something about someone else, like gossip, you feel the need to say it and you want to burst it out and tell people what that word is about, like the story about someone else. And if he's likening it to a woman in labor, don't worry, it's not going to be like that. Only a fool will feel that way about gossip, and that they'll be the ones who will want to burst forth with that news. But don't do that. Like, take courage, it will not burst you, kind of thing. I think that's my understanding of what the last couple of verses are about.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much how I understood it, right? He's saying that a fool, someone who's not wise, when they hear a bit of juicy gossip, it's like they feel like, oh, I can't keep it in, and it actually hurts them. They're the ones suffering the pain because it hurts to not tell someone, right? They want to blurt it out, they want to tell someone. And he's basically saying, this is wrong. This is like having an arrow stuck in the flesh of a thigh, right? It's like it makes you lame. It disables you so that you can't actually enjoy your life and get on with your life because you just so want to tell someone about this when you shouldn't. And I actually took that thing in verse 10 as being, again, his sense of humor here. Have you heard a word? Let it die with you, right? You hear that bit of juicy gossip. That's it. Be the dead end. Be the end of the line. Don't let the word travel any further. Don't let it come back out of you again. And take courage. It will not burst you. Like, even though you feel like you're going to pop if you don't tell someone, you know what? You're not physically going to pop. You're not actually going to explode. Don't worry. You can just sort of let it go. I don't know. Maybe I look for humor where it isn't, but that's how I understood it. That he's actually kind of, what's the word? Sort of being ironic here, If you don't tell anyone, what's going to happen? And that sort of fits with the other verse that I've underlined there, verse 7. Never repeat a word, and you will lose nothing at all. I think that's just such common sense, right? Why? Why do you feel this desire? Why do you feel this urge that you have to tell someone? What do you actually benefit? What does anyone actually benefit when you do that? And what do you lose if you don't? And I think the answer is nothing, right? He wants to tell us, if you hear that bit of juicy gossip and you don't pass it on, the world is not somehow worse off because you didn't pass it on. And you are not somehow worse off because you didn't pass it on. So don't worry about it. There's no need, to be too worried about that. And then he also wants to tell us that sometimes it's not just about passing on the gossip. Sometimes it's about acting on the gossip. Sometimes you hear a bit of juicy gossip and it changes how you think of someone, or it changes how you deal with someone. And of course, gossip is not necessarily going to be true. So this can be a very unfair thing. So he also wants to tell us, make sure that if it is something that really matters, right? A lot of gossip, it's not my business. I'm just curious and I want to know because I'm a sticky beak. But, you know, sometimes someone will tell you something and it's very important. It may be about someone who's doing something illegal at work. And like, you need to know, because if they're doing something illegal at work, everybody's going to eventually suffer for that. So there may be some things where you hear gossip and it actually matters. And what his advice is here, don't just jump in and believe it. Remember at the beginning of that first passage, he says, he who trusts quickly is unwise in heart, right? So don't just believe everything you hear. Don't just be quick to accept what people have said, but get to the bottom of it if it's something that really matters. So he continues on. Question a friend, perhaps he did not do it. And if he did something, perhaps he will not repeat it. Question a neighbor, perhaps he did not say it. And if he did say it, may he not say it twice. Question a friend, for often it is slander. So do not believe every word. A person slips, but it was not his intention. For who has not sinned with his tongue? Question your neighbor before you threaten him, and give place to the law of the Most High. So you see here, he's encouraging us, don't just accept the gossip you hear. Get to the bottom of it. Ask them. Be open. And of course, he's talking here not about going to someone who has nothing to do with the matter and, you know, talking to them about it. He's saying if you heard something bad about your neighbor, go and find your neighbor and talk to them and get to the bottom of it, get to the truth of it. And even if it turns out the gossip is true, even if it turns out that he did the thing, the bad thing, don't necessarily judge him forever that way because he did that bad thing. Maybe he won't repeat it. Maybe he won't do it again. Maybe, you know, he may not say it twice if he said something bad. Maybe now when you talk to him, he'll feel bad about saying it and he won't say it again. You can see here there is a little bit of that sense of, you know, Christianity, of love and compassion and trying to understand the other person rather than jumping to conclusions about other people. Trying to put yourself in their place, trying to feel a sense of empathy with them, and realizing that, you know, what does he say in verse 16? For who has not sinned with his tongue? Right? He's basically reminding us, if you hear a bit of gossip that so-and-so said this and that, and you feel like you want to judge him and, you know, treat him differently, just remember, all of us have said stupid things. All of us have caused problems with our words. So is it, you know, is it the right thing? Should I set myself as superior to that other person when I myself do the same sort of sin? Okay, so any thoughts before we move on? Yeah, Rob and Julie, go for it.
Hey everyone, it's Rob again. I just wanted to ask a question here because it's kind of from 13 onwards, it's kind of gossip in a way, no? So for example, if you hear something and there's a line here, I'm not sure if this is your comments or if it's Sirach here, where it says if it really matters, but
Yep, that's me.
yeah, I guess my question is like, what really matters in order, therefore, to kind of follow up on something you've heard? Because that's kind of obviously it's very vague, but at the same time, you're also participating in the gossip by following up on it in a way. So I'm just trying to see like that fine line of, do you act or even question if you've heard something? Can't you just kind of, you know, ignore it and just move on, as opposed to following up and, you know, getting to the bottom of it and kind of, that's kind of where I was going with it. But where's that line? I guess is my question.
Mm. Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And I certainly don't read this as a command, right? I don't think he's saying every time you hear a bit of gossip, you have to go and question, the person that it's about. Clearly all that stuff we read before was about, being silent, knowing when to speak and when not to speak and stuff like that. There's certainly, I think if we take both of those passages together, there are certainly going to be times when you hear stuff and you should like you said, just let it go, just drop it, because there's no point. What good will come from pursuing this? And that's why I put in that dot point, right? Because I think what he's talking about here is he's talking about, having just told us about, letting the word die with you, and it's not going to, you're not going to burst if you don't talk about it and so on. Having set that foundation, he's now moved on to the situation where, okay, let me think of an example. I don't know. Someone comes and tells me, so-and-so, I was with him the other day and he told me he really hates you, Abuna, and he can't stand you. And he told me all this really bad stuff about you and he never wants to see you and talk to you again. Right. And then I see so-and-so at church on Sunday and he comes and he says, hello, Abuna, how are you going? I miss you. And, and he's very nice and talkative and so on. Okay. So what would I do in that situation? Actually, that's probably a bad example. I probably should just ignore the gossip, shouldn't I? Because it's probably someone just trying to cause trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe a better example, which I should have brought up first, is if I'm at a workplace and I hear that someone is, for example, I don't know, acting inappropriately with people in the workplace. Okay, now that is, at the moment, that's just gossip. But if I don't follow that up, then there is a danger that the person who's acting inappropriately will just continue and maybe even get worse and worse and worse, if it is true that that's actually happening and it isn't just, slander or whatever. So that may be a situation where I'm actually responsible for something, and to not follow that up, to not get to the bottom of it, would actually be irresponsible and might cause harm to people, and that would be my fault because I could have stopped the harm from happening. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Or you're probably thinking more just in like personal situations, are you, Robert?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess that line there that you just said, the situations where you're kind of responsible for something would obviously lend itself to taking whether it's a gossip or a comment or even fact more seriously and kind of getting to the bottom of it. So I guess in situations where you need to, because it's kind of serious, I guess in some kind of responsibility aspect, it sounds like that's probably the best time to follow up on any kind of queries or concerns like that. Yeah, cool.
And I suppose, even in just sort of our friendships and stuff, if I hear something and I actually, despite my best efforts, I actually can't let it go. That may be another situation where rather than letting it stew inside me, maybe I could go and clear it up. Sometimes that might be the case. It's very hard to just give a general rule, I think, Rob. I think that's the problem. Every situation's different and you kind of just have to look at the specific, situation maybe.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So would anyone like to weigh in on gossip a little before we go on? Okay. So I've got two more, but I think we've only got time for one of them. So I'll give you a choice. We have swearing as in crude language, and we have swearing as in, vows and oaths and making promises. I swear I will do this. So which one are you more interested in, the crude language or the vows and the oaths?
Vows and oaths.
vows and oaths? Okay, let's go with that one. Yeah, of course, you're more than welcome to look up chapter 23 if you're interested in the crude language. Okay, so here's what Sirach says. Do not accustom your mouth to vows, nor make a habit of using the name of the Holy One. For as a servant who is continually beaten will not lack bruises, so also he who makes a vow and continually names the Holy One will never be cleansed from sin. A man who swears many oaths will be filled with lawlessness, and that plague will not depart from his house. If he offends, his sin will be on him, and if he overlooks it, he has sinned doubly. If he swears in vain, he will not be declared righteous, for his house will be filled with trouble. And I've just got here, this is reminiscent of the Gospel of Matthew and the letter of James. So I'll just read them quickly and then we'll come back to Sirach, just for a kind of bit of comparison and context. So Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, "Again you have heard it was said, it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one." And then James, many years later, just puts it much more briefly. "But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no, no, lest you fall into judgment." It seems quite clear that we shouldn't swear and make vows and oaths. Would you agree? Or should we? What do you think?
Abuna, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why is it so bad to swear or take an oath? Like
Yes.
the way that this reads, it's as if it's a very, very bad thing. Maybe I'm just not aware, but it seems like they're making it sound like it's terrible to swear or take an oath, but I don't see it to be that bad.
Yeah, I agree that they're making it sound to be terrible. So yeah, why? Are there any hints in the passages that we've read? So, I mean, let's think, what does it mean to swear or make an oath? It's basically kind of saying, trying to think of an example. I don't know why. The only example that's coming to my mind is when I have visited some lovely elderly people in the past, and they really wanted me to eat, and I wasn't hungry, and they sometimes swear a little oath, something like, "On my mother's grave, you must have this extra piece of pie," or something like that. I don't know. Or I think maybe a more common situation might be in, if someone, I don't know, if someone thinks you're lying and you swear that you're telling the truth. And I think in the old days, yeah, look, I've got to be honest with you, I'm not sure I really understand it. What does it mean to swear by God, by the Holy One, the name of the Holy One? What does it mean to swear by his throne? Sorry, go ahead.
So you can say, like, I swear to God. Obviously, that I can understand. That's very wrong.
Okay, but what does it? Sorry, but what does that actually mean when someone says that? Like how is that? How is that
A
somehow?
promise to God, or like a
Yeah, like a promise to God or
Abuna,
on God's name.
Abuna, I think it's like an utmost way of telling the truth is to. I mean, I don't think you're swearing. You're swear. I swear to God. You're not swearing at him, obviously.
No, this is different to using
This,
bad
yeah,
language.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, but yeah, it's your way of committing to the truth.
So is it something like what I'm telling you is the truth, and if it isn't the truth and I'm actually lying to you, then I surrender myself, to God to do with me, punish me in whatever way He wants.
Yeah, like there's no way that I would not tell the truth in front of God, and that's why I'm swearing to God. I swear to God. Is that right? Like I know we used to say, we don't say growing up. Magda would know this, but we would say, "Ul qudam rabbana, qul qudam rabbana," like as if like
Okay.
God is right next to you. You're not gonna lie, or you're not gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's like probably the Coptic way of saying, "I swear to God." But yeah.
Okay. So you're kind of saying that that's kind of just reminding the people who are talking to each other that they're, in the presence of God. And
That's right.
that's a motivation for
Correct.
saying the truth. Yeah. Bishoyna, Gabby?
Agavi, I guess I've got 2 points. One of them, Agavi just mentioned that generally, like, I guess it fits in with the Matthew passage that we can't really swear on anything that isn't ours. Like, it's not ours to give up if we're lying or we're wrong. So even our possessions here on earth ultimately belong to God. So we can't say it's really ours if we're going to take that approach. But also, I'm like thinking of the Sirach passage. To me, it sounds like he's advising against continually saying, I'm being honest, I'm telling the truth, because eventually you're going to slip up. And the more you're guaranteeing and promising, whether it's through your own fault or lack of awareness, you're going to slip up and maybe not be able to fulfill that promise or guarantee.
Right. Okay. And I think that makes more sense of it. Yeah. It's this idea that if I swear to something, I'm actually claiming control over something where I actually don't have that control. So yeah, I can't control God's reaction to my words. That's not me. That's not under my control. It's not in my hands. I can't even, what is it Jesus who says it? Yeah, you cannot make one hair white or black. Leave aside hair dyes, obviously. But what he means is like, what's the point of swearing by your hair? It's not under your control. So in a sense, it's a kind of lie. It's a pretense. You're pretending that you have control and power that you don't actually have. Sorry, Rocky and T, go for it.
I was just going to say, when does it mean that, doesn't it also discredit everything else you say? Because people will just assume, like, it's I guess a common part of our language now where someone says, look, to be honest with you, or to tell you the truth. Does that mean when you don't say that, you're not saying the truth? You make people doubt that you lose credibility, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And yeah, methinks he doth protest too much. Sometimes when when you really make a big deal out of it, you're kind of, why is he making such a big deal out of it? Kind of thing. And I think what you're saying goes well with what both Jesus and James say, right? Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Right? Just always speak the truth, and then you never have to swear about it, because that's just what you do all the time. I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what's your thought then on, sorry, go ahead, Murray or Jono.
Did you want to say it?
I do have a quick question. You know, in the Coptic community of Warner House, sometimes people make, I guess, promises, or I guess you can call them covenants with God, and say, you know, I will add an extra week to this particular fast if this in turn happens. Like I feel like it's probably like a more old-fashioned type of, I guess, covenant that people used to do. I don't know if it still happens now.
It
Is
does.
that what it's not, is that what they're trying to avoid in making promises or oaths to the Lord, or is that a different thing completely?
No, I don't. I think that comes under this topic as
So
well.
that's wrong?
Yeah, look, I think I have to tread very carefully here because I run the risk of upsetting some people. Look, I mean, one of the most famous vows in the Old Testament is Japheth and his daughter, you know, the soldier who goes out to war, and he vows to God, if you help us win this war and let me come back alive, I promise I will kill and sacrifice the first living thing that comes out of my house when I get home. And of course, what is it that runs out of his house as soon as he gets home? His daughter. And so he has to keep his vow. And so she says, just give me a few days to, you know, say goodbye to my friends and have a nice time with them. And then he kills her. And I think the moral of that story is not, wow, good on Japheth because he kept his vow. I think the moral of that story is don't make stupid vows, even if you make them to God. And I kind of think that that's what Sirach is saying here as well, right? A man who swears many oaths will be filled with lawlessness because you don't know, right? You use an oath to kind of get what you want, or to strengthen your own resolve to do something that you're finding hard to do, or as a kind of a contract, a deal with God so that you can, you know, get the thing that you wanted to get. But you don't know. You don't know what the consequences are going to be, either for you or for other people. So why do that, right? It's a way to actually bring sin and lawlessness into your life, which is exactly what happened with Japheth. He ended up killing his own daughter. That's a horrible, horrible thing. It's an awful thing. So having said that, right, people, yes, it still does happen, Jonathan. I still see people who will say to me, you know, in the old days in Egypt, it used to be, you know, I vow to bring, I don't know, a calf on the feast of St. George, you know, if I get this job, or if my kids graduate, or, you know, whatever it might be. But now people just make a donation, you know, to a church or something like that. Look, I can tell you from my limited point of view, I'm not a fan. I'm one of those people who thinks, well, I take Jesus's word seriously. Your Father in heaven knows what you need even before you ask him. I can't see that me, you know, making a donation is somehow going to make God love me more and treat me better than he would have if I hadn't done that. But I can also understand that, you know, everybody has their own kind of relationship with God and their own language with which they speak with God. And I think I could understand that for some people, that is a kind of a language by which they express their trust in God, their reliance on God, the fact that, you know, they're acknowledging that good things come from God ultimately, and that we live by his mercy. And this is a way for them to kind of say that with actions. So, I don't want to say, oh, nobody should ever do that. But I will say I personally find it a bit hard to sort of, you know, feel comfortable with it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
What about all the people in the Old Testament who couldn't give birth until they promised their child would go and stay with him? to it, and then God gave them their kids after that. It kind of seems like God was holding off until they made that promise, but then give them that child.
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I wonder what was really sort of the case there, though. Might God have just done that anyway, even if they hadn't sort of, I don't know. It's possible. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyone want to give their thoughts on that?
I was just going to say that there is an element of, I suppose, control, which I think we have mentioned, that when you're swearing or like making that oath or that vow, it's, again, it's not always seen as this, as like intention is everything at the end of the day, but it's a sense of a person gaining that control back. Like, if this happens, then I get to be in control of the situation that is going to, or the end result of the situation. So I can swear to God, and then I've got the control back now because I have given him something and I'm getting something in return. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I feel that's often part of the thought process going on. You remind me of a story I read once about a simple old man in Egypt it was simple. I think it was a man whose son had gone to war, and he was really worried that he was going to die in one of the wars, in Egypt, that Egypt fought. So he went to church, and he got a necktie, and he went up to the icon of Saint Mary, and he tied the necktie around the icon of Saint Mary, the picture of Saint Mary. And he said very, angrily and emotionally, "I'm not going to set you free until you bring my son back." So I don't know. And look, I mean, in his mind, I think that is a way of kind of taking control of things. He's helpless. He doesn't know any way to bring his son back safely. So he goes to his best friend and he expresses his helplessness by trying to do something that's sort of saying, I need your help. I really need your help. If you're really my friend, you're not going to leave me alone. He's saying that to Saint Mary. You've got to help me, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I could certainly understand that. I don't know. Anyone else want to say any thoughts?
I just wanted to ask, did it work? Did the son come back home?
Yes, because I don't think otherwise, nobody would have been telling the story. His son did come back, yes. And he did set Saint Mary free. You'll be pleased to know. Alrighty, so I'm looking at the chat, and I noticed that there was a couple of questions that came up. So Farah's asking, and there's one more. Farah's asking, how does that work if your right is to practice your religion, for example? With the way the world is going, there will come a time where we will have to fight for our right to believe in God. Yeah, look, I mean, I think back to the first few centuries of Christianity and I only just learned this recently. For about 250 years, it was legally punishable by death just to be a Christian. That was the law. I don't imagine that that's ever going to happen in our lifetimes, that we're ever going to get to that stage where just to be a Christian is going to kill you. But even then, I don't think that's clearly, it's not just I don't think, clearly it did not stop Christians from practicing their religion, because they did. And in fact, dying as martyrs is practicing their religion. That's exactly what we should do as Christians living in a world that isn't accepting the truth about Christianity. So I don't think anybody in this world has the power to stop you from believing in God. I don't think anyone has the power to stop you from practicing your religion. They just don't. If practicing our religion was just a matter of doing actions, you know, external actions, then yeah, people could put chains on us and, you know, put us in jail or whatever it might be, and then we wouldn't. But that's not what Christianity is. Christianity is not just about things you do. It's about your heart. It's about your way of thinking. It's about how you relate to God and to other people. And it's about how you react to whatever happens to you in your life, no matter what. So I don't know, that would be my thought. I don't think Christianity is about rights. Christianity is about love. And I think that's the whole point of Christianity. It's the whole point of turning the other cheek and walking the second mile and loving your enemy, right? All of those involve giving up your rights. And yet Jesus commands us to give up our rights. But he does that because he knows that the thing that really matters, our faith in God and our life with God, is forever going to be beyond the power of any human being to stop us. They just can't. It's not that kind of thing. So is that anyone want to make a comment before I go on to the others? Okay. And then a very good question. Don't we make an oath in court? They still do that, right? That's still a thing. Bishoy's nodding. Yeah.
Oath or affirmation. So they have affirmation if you're like non-religious. So that's
Right.
literally saying my yes is yes and my no is no.
Okay. And I actually think that's better. I have always thought it's very weird that you take a Bible in which these words are written, right? You shall not, I say to you, do not swear at all, right? Those words are written in the Bible on which I put my hand and swear. There seems to be a contradiction there. So it's actually maybe a good thing that we have an alternative now where you don't have to swear on a Bible. And look, you know, all that stuff that Sirach was saying about, you know, if you swear and then you don't follow it up, you know, what if I swear that oath and then I get really anxious and I end up saying something wrong, and that's just going to plague my conscience, you know, forever after that. Why put yourself in that situation? Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Why complicate matters?
Josh is asking about marriage vows, and isn't that something we say? I swear.
Yeah, so actually, I mean, it's interesting. We don't actually have marriage vows in the Coptic Church or any Orthodox church. I think that's a Western thing. And I have a suspicion, I'm not 100% sure about this, that they're fairly recent, like just the last few centuries, even in Western churches. And I think it's sort of a reflection of this idea of the move from marriage being something that is a sacrament that God performs to the idea of marriage as being this romantic thing, and, you know, I'm making the choice and I'm committing to you, and that's the most important thing about marriage. I'm not saying that that's not important. It is obviously a really important thing in marriage, but, you know, which is the most important? So we don't, but we do have some other vows, and again, I think they're relatively recent. So like when I became a priest, at the ordination, I had to recite a vow about, you know, I'm not going to disobey the church and I'm going to try and be a good person and all that sort of stuff. There's no consequences to those vows, right? It's not like, you know, if I don't do this, may God strike me dead. So it's not that kind of oath or that kind of vow. The way I understand those vows that we make in churches is they're more like a statement of intention, of very strong intention. It's like publicly saying in front of witnesses, this is what I will, to the best of my ability, try to do. And I think that's different. I think that's, it's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do a good thing and telling everyone, and you guys hold me to account and help me to do the good thing. That's how I would understand them anyway. Or do you see them differently? Okay, so it's just kind of the last question that's there. Is there a difference between swearing an oath and making a promise? I'm sure there is some kind of technical difference in the definition of those two things, but I think the spirit of them is fairly similar. And I know I've heard people say you should never swear an oath, but it's okay to make promises. Maybe, I suppose, if the promise is understood in the way that I just described a little while ago about vows in church, if a promise is understood as a statement of intention, rather than a guarantee that, no matter what happens, I will do this. If I promise you that, I will do my best not to be late next Wednesday, right? I promise you that that's what I will try to do. I think that's okay, right? If I swear by the throne of God in heaven that I will not be late next Wednesday, well, how can I, what happens if something happens and I can't, make it next Wednesday, right? Now I've sort of, made this huge, big thing and I can't keep it. So, to say that I have an intention to do this is very similar to letting your yes be yes and your no be no. I'm telling you simply a fact. This is my intention and I will do my best to do it. I think that's okay. I don't see there's any problem with that. That can actually be quite useful.
Josh has something to say about it.
Yes, please. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you say it again?
I swear by God in heaven that I will try not to be late.
But why? Why bring in, the swearing by God? What does that add to it? It seems unnecessary. It seems, above my pay grade. I can speak about my own intentions because that's under my control, right? But once I bring the throne of God in heaven into it, well, that's not really under my control. Why am I making promises about that when it's not for me to, to control it? Alrighty. I don't want to exhaust people by going on too long. We should probably stop there. So, as I said, God willing, and as St. James says, we should always say, if God wills, then next Wednesday, we'll finish our very quick sprint through the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, by looking at what he has to say about death. Should have kept that one for in a month's time, Halloween. Okay, so yes, thank you. Very dramatic. Yes, I needed some kind of, spooky music in the background or something like that. And a few drips of blood coming, dripping down behind.
I'll work on it next week. Don't worry. If God wills it.
Well done. Sorry, what's going on in the chat there? So do we keep the parking spot or not? Come on, Magdi, let it go.
No, Bun, I think he's being legit. I think he wants you to answer.
No, but it is definitely a moment where you don't feel Christian, definitely. Because I speak from I confess, I'm not giving up that spot. And you always feel terrible about it, but you just, it's been 25 minutes, Do you feel terrible about it? Yeah, you feel terrible.
But what if the guy who's taken it from you has been driving around for 85 minutes?
Maybe we should all, as a group, agree to always give it up to the first person, but then not after that. Otherwise, you'll never park.
Or better still, shop online.
Is that what the Sony Dahlia does? Everyone?
Yes, all the time. I'm pretty sure we're keeping Australia Post in business.
Abuna, if it makes you feel any better, the lady knows me now and we're friends.
Oh, which lady is this?
The post lady, because
Ah.
she's the courier lady, the Australia Post lady. She asks me, "Where's the girls?" and she waves to my daughters.
Kiwi. Actually, Abuna, on this note, can we just share that we've got the Holy Family retreat or camp, whatever you want to call it, December 10 to 12. So the Friday, December 10 to Sunday, December 12. And I rang it's going to be at Stanwell, the Top Center at Stanwell Tops. And I rang them and they said this is still going ahead. Like December 1 should be available for everyone. And so if everyone can, well, I think Marina's already put a message, but if you can save the date, everyone's welcome. You know, families with kids, without kids, whatever, it's all welcome. So there should be enough room for everyone. But we do need to get sort of an indication soon about, you know, numbers. So that will happen soon. So if you have any questions, just message us and let us know. Yeah.
That would be so nice, wouldn't it, to actually, gosh, I'm just dreaming now of actually leaving my LGA.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've got 2 whole stories of when we've got the air-conditioned new building. So 2 whole stories to ourselves, and it's got like 3 meeting rooms and a lot of space. So it's good.
If God wills.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else, or is that it?
No, that's it.
All righty. Let's, we'll just close with a little prayer. And then if anybody wants to hang around and chat, of course, you're welcome. Everyone's disappeared before I could get them to pray. Bill, I'm sorry. Would you mind? Thank you.
Father Lord.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen.
Thank you to God for allowing us to gather online and to learn more about your word and to understand these different things that we can apply in our lives and how things don't change and your rule applies to us all the time, dear God. We ask you that you help us to take these practical examples from the book of Sirach so that we can use this in our day-to-day lives and to be able to live a more Christian life so that people can see that we're different and that we have a light that shines throughout all the whole world. I ask you, God, that you bless every single person and be with us as we come to the end, hopefully, of the lockdown, and help us, dear God, to stay close to you, dear God, in everything and in all times, dear God. We ask, dear God, that you bless each and every single one of us. Amen.
And hear us, our Lord, through the intercessions of Saint Mary and the Holy Family and all your saints and angels, as we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the